والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. The last hadith we were explaining from our latest work, Full Hadith on fasting and Ramadan, volume 1, was the narration of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu with regards to brushing your teeth while fasting in the month of Ramadan. And before that was the hadith of Hafsa with regards to the stipulation of making the niyyah before Salat al-Fajr daily. And before that was the narration of Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu with regards to all deeds being based off of intentions. And before that was the narration of Abu Hurairah and Sahihain with regards to the prohibition of fasting 1 or 2 days before the commencement of Ramadan out of fear of the cloudiness and lack of visibility of the new moon phase. Also the hadith of Talha ibn Ubaidillah collected by Imam Ahmad and Imam Tirmidhi with regards to the supplication of the commencement of Ramadan. We explained all of that. Page number 43. The author of All Hadith False says, never miss eating suhoor. Hadith number 21 is narrated by Anas radiallahu anhu. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, Tasahharu fa inna fi sahuri barakatan. Take a meal a little before dawn, for there is a blessing in taking a meal at that time. And this hadith is agreed upon. Never miss eating suhoor, meaning the high recommendation of eating suhoor, alaykum salam, is that it's extremely recommended, alaykum salam, and one could argue and say that it's obligatory if it wasn't for the fact that there's consensus of the ulama of Islam is that suhoor is recommended and not obligatory. And from the qara'in as-sarifa, from the things that prove that this obligation is only for a recommendation, is al-wisal, is that the Prophet ﷺ fasted consecutively and the companions fasted consecutively, and obviously if they fasted consecutively then they had to have missed suhoor, proving that the command here to eat suhoor isn't for wujub, but it is for recommendation. And if it wasn't for that context clue, then of course taking the suhoor would be mandatory. So the hadith shows us the importance of eating suhoor, and from its importance is that there is a spiritual barakah in doing so. And there's also a tangible benefit in doing so. As far as the obvious preparation for fasting, one getting the necessary nutrition, the nutrients, and vitamins and minerals that are essential, water, hydration, etc. Let alone that when a person is up during that time, that is a virtuous time in which the believers seek their Lord's forgiveness. And that time is also a time in which you can find poor, needy people that are asking for food. They don't have the money or the food for suhoor. And also is that eating suhoor allows a person to fight the pains and pangs of hunger later on, which will prevent him or her from having bad character and being irritable and grouchy. And that's a barakah. And then many other fawaid as well with regards to eating suhoor. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Of course, as we've explained before, the suhoor is allowed to be enjoyed all the way up to the adhan of Salat al-Fajr. As soon as the adhan commences, the adhan starts, one must stop. One does not continue to eat the suhoor until after the adhan. One does not eat suhoor until the sky becomes light and bright and the sun has risen. Also, the suhoor, just like iftar, isn't a means of overeating and stuffing and gorging. Also, the suhoor should be something that's not going to make you terribly thirsty. Whether it's outwardly thirsty or whether something that is going to dehydrate you inwardly. Rather, the suhoor should be something filling, something wholesome, something that will stick to your ribs, quote unquote, and something that won't make you awfully, horribly bloated or your stomach upset or thirsty, which will disturb and bother your fasting later on. Khairin inshallah, and of course a person is allowed to eat whatever suhoor he wants to of his culture, whether it's breakfast food, whether it's rice and meat, whether it's fruits and vegetables, or steel cut oatmeal, whatever is from your culture and from your diet with regards to suhoor, keeping in mind those general points. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. All the other rulings and manners of eating and drinking, and the etiquette of eating and drinking and sitting together and congregating to do so will also apply to suhoor. The recommendation of eating with the believers, eating with your right hand, saying Bismillah, can you eat till you're full, a third ear, a third food, a third ear, etc., etc., etc. Let alone eating the food which is tayyib, which is halal. Halal tayyib. Okay? Wallahu ta'ala. Next chapter on page 45 says, don't waste time when it's time to break your fast. And we see once again, before we move forward, the cohesive fabric of the book. Ramadan, how does it begin? When does it begin? The intention. And right after a person makes his intention, he's going to have suhoor. Whether you had the intention at night and went to sleep, or whether you make an intention in the Fajr time. Khair, inshallah. Never, or it says, do not, or it says, don't waste time when it's time to break your fast. Hadith number 22. Sahal ibn Sa'ad radiallahu anhu narrated that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, La yazalu nasu bi khairin ma ajru al-fitr. The people will continue to prosper as long as they hasten the breaking of the fast. And this hadith is agreed upon. So many people, they think that it's an act of piety. They think it's sunnah. They think it's righteousness for a person to wait until the mu'adhin has finished the adhan, or wait until after the salat to eat. And if a person rushes or hastens forth to break the fast, they'll accuse that person of being greedy or impatient, or oh well, fasting just isn't about eating and drinking, brother. Just wait a second. You waited 12 hours, 14 hours, 9 hours, you can wait another 20 minutes. And all of this is from the waswas of the shaitan. Rather, when it is time for Salat al-Maghrib, hasten, rush forth to break your fast. Whether the mu'adhin has made the adhan, or whether the adhan is late, or whether you're using an app or a prayer timetable which is accurate. As soon as it's time, Bismillah. There is no wait a second, oh relax, slow down. None of that is from the Sunnah. And the Prophet ﷺ said that the Ummah, the people, the Muslims will always be upon goodness as long as they do this. And that is, they hasten, they rush forth to breaking the fast. And that the Jews and the Christians or other people, they may fast and they may continue to fast all throughout the wee hours of the night. They don't rush to break their fast. And that is not the way of the people of Islam. And this is a general principle and a general rule in Islam, is that when something is lawful, when something is halal, you should rush forward to it. There's no hesitation. There's nothing to stand back for. I don't know. Bismillah. It's lawful. Whatever that thing may be. Money, that's lawful for you. And there's so many different types of money and ways of getting money which are haram. So when you come across good halal money, you shouldn't hesitate. Alaykum salam. Or food and drink, or a man's wife, it's lawful. Bismillah. There is no, oh, I'm not sure, oh, no. Bismillah. Seek Allah's bounty. And anything else which is yours, which is lawful, which Allah has allowed you and commanded you to enjoy, you should not hesitate and you should not delay. And it is not a sign of righteousness. It is not a sign of piety. It is not a sign of patience. It is not a sign of self-control. It is not a sign of maturity. It's not a sign of manhood to say, oh, you're in a rush. That's wrong. Because there are many, many other things that the Muslim has to what? Stay away from. And practice a great deal of self-control. All right? So this is an extremely important mindset to have, especially for the younger brothers. Right? You work like a dog, right? To do what? They say to party like a what? A king. Work hard, the way you can enjoy the things in life. Because when it's time to work, it's what? It's time to work. It's not time for fun and laughing and joking. So when it's time for laughing and fun and joking, you should what? I think that. And not say, oh, I don't want to enjoy it. I'm really not hungry. I'm really glad. That's incorrect. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Khairan inshallah ta'ala. And of course, rushing forth or hastening to break your fast, as we said, as long as it's time. Not before the correct adhan and not before the correct period of time. But once it's time, Bismillah. You run right into it. Now, one question is, the mu'adhin. When the mu'adhin makes the adhan, what does he do? Should he make the adhan first, or should he break his fast first?
Break his fast.
Break his fast.
Break his fast.
Break his fast. How do people know when it's time to break their fast if he doesn't call the adhan?
By the time you said if it's accurate time.
But we're talking about like how, like normal, how things are supposed to be with the adhan. So does he sacrifice himself for the people? It's a rock and a hard place now. If he eats before the adhan, the people have to wait. If he makes the adhan before he eats, he has to wait. You get it? Perhaps, wallahu alam, this is all included in the virtue of the mu'adhin. Al-imamu daminun. The hadith states, أطول الناس عن عقل يوم القيامة المؤذنون. Hadith with regards to the virtue of the adhan. If the people knew about the reward of making the adhan, the reward of the first rank, etc. And from this, wallahu alam, is that the mu'adhin is selfless. He sacrifices his comfort, his time for the people. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Next chapter says, move forward. It says, should you have a large meal upon breaking your fast before offering salat al-maghrib? Hadith number 23, Salman bin Amir radiallahu anhu narrated that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, إذا أفطر أحدكم فليفطر على تمر فإنه بركة فإن لم يجد تمرا فالماء له طهور. When one of you breaks his fast, he should do so with dates, for they provide blessing. But if he cannot get any, he should break his fast with water, for it is purifying. This hadith is collected by Tirmidhi, Ibn Majah, and others. So the chapter heading says, it asks a question, should you have a full meal before you offer Salat al-Maghrib? Getting you to think. Many people that eat a big meal, then they pray. Which isn't necessarily haram, but it's not the sunnah. It's not the preferred way. And the preferred way is to take something light, something quick, something simple, then you're allowed to, or then you can pray, then you eat your bigger meal. And there are many wisdoms behind this. Oftentimes when people eat, they have a full meal. People, they get sluggish. They may delay it even longer. They may miss the prayer, laughing, joking, drinking. Next thing you know, Maghrib goes out. Right? Let alone the fact that people may just forget. Because they're so hungry and thirsty, they may forget about the prayer. So therefore, have the sunnah iftar, which is fresh dates, if you can. If you don't find fresh dates, then dry dates. If you can't find dry dates, then water. And the hadith states here, it says that the dates have barakah in them. We can go on and on and on with regards to the virtue and the blessing of dates. Walaikum salam. And how Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah mentioned there was no accident why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose the staple food of his last and final prophet to be dates. The barakah and the wholesomeness of dates with regards to things that are beyond science, things that can't be found in the book. Spiritual blessings, let alone the scientific or the scientific nutritional benefits, the natural sugar, the wholesomeness, the fiber, all right, of the date, and what the date does for the human body, for the mind, and perhaps what? For the soul. Naam, wallahu ta'ala alam. And if a person can't find dates, then pure water, all right? And the same applies to that as well. The blessing of water, the tangible benefits of water, person being thirsty, dehydrated, right? And this hadith here, it also shows us that a person should avoid things that are going to cause further dehydration, such as Mountain Dew. Some brothers, they like Mountain Dew. Only Allah knows what's in Mountain Dew. It might be khinzir, the flesh of pork belly. Some brothers, they love Mountain Dew, let alone the food coloring. Allah, don't argue with the truth, Afi. Don't be obstinate, all right? Take the nasiha. Some brothers, they break their fast. La ilaha illallah. May Allah guide us all. I mean, what's important is, we're not saying Mountain Dew is haram. Dates and water, that's the sunnah. It doesn't mean, though, that you can't have other things, other small things. Some people use sambosas, samosas, Polari, I mean,
So
other things as well, and that also goes back to one's cultural association, like we said, right? One's cultural association. Don't make your cultural food the sunnah. Nah, my culture says what? Mountain Dew and Doritos. Don't shame me. Your culture may be yogurt and sesame seed bread. Right? Everyone has their what? Their own cultural norms. And as long as it's lawful, then what? La ba's. Wallahu ta'ala. Next chapter says, what should you say after eating or drinking? Hadith number 24. Abu Ayyub al-Ansari narrated that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Alhamdulillahi alladhi at'ama wa saqa wa sawwaghahu wa ja'ala lahu makhraja. Praise be to Allah who has given food and drink, made it easy to swallow, and provided an exit for it. And this hadith is collected by Imam Abu Dawood in his Sunan. So this dua is recommended whenever you eat and drink, inside or outside of Ramadan. But of course, a big part of Ramadan to most of us is eating and drinking. And oftentimes we're more conscious, we're more aware of Allah and His rights upon us, and the recommended acts, the haram acts, the disliked acts in this month. So if you're not making the dua after you eat and drink, now will be the prime time to learn it, right? And there's several different supplications to be made after eating and drinking. This is just one of them. This is just what? One of them, all right? Okay, there are other versions, other hadiths that people use for the supplication after eating and drinking. This one is narrated by Abu Ayyub al-Ansari. Okay? And that is, obviously, we're continuing. See the flow? Iftar, suhoor, right? Dates, water, and what? The dua. So this dua says, Alhamdulillahi alladhi at'ama wa saqa. All thanks, all praise, all gratitude is for Allah, who has given it'am, who's fed me, wa saqa, and He has given me drink. And if it wasn't for Allah making it easy, if it wasn't for Allah making you healthy, if it wasn't for Allah giving you taste buds, giving you a digestive system, giving you a throat, a tongue, none of these things would be easy. Rather, your hands, your fingertips, your thumb, right? A jammed thumb, you can't pick the glass up. A broken jaw. Many, many other things that go wrong which prevent people from properly eating and drinking. Allergies, right? And the list goes on and on and on. So all praises for Allah that made food lawful, they made it clean, they made it halal, they made it affordable, they made it cheap, they made it accessible, right? And most importantly, He says, وَجَعَلَ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. And He has allowed the food to come in and to go out. And what will happen to the human body if he ate and drank and it didn't exit his body? If the waste stayed in his body, right? If the nutrition wasn't stripped from the food and the waste was pushed out. So if you just look at the human body system from beginning to end, A to Z, it is unbelievably perfect. Every single thing is perfect about the human system. And you don't understand the perfectness of it until something goes wrong. And the doctor tells you, you can't eat this. You can't have this. You have to get this removed. You have to get this checked out. You have to get this cut open. You have to get this extended. You have to get this replaced. And this small little tiny thing inside your body, your digestive system, whatever, your bowels, whatever goes wrong, only Allah knows the havoc that is released on you, the pain that you suffer from something from your innards being messed up. But before you got that cancer, before you got that illness, that infection, that disease, that inflammation, how smooth did the body move? Just like that. Newborn baby, what? No flaws. Perfection. So this is something that we should thank Allah for, the mighty and the most high. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Hadith number 25. Okay, what time is it then? 7:33. Miqdam ibn Ma'di Karib radiallahu anhu narrated that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, ما ملأ آدمي وعاء شرا من بطن بحسب ابن آدم أكلات يكن صلبه فإن كان لا محالة فثلث لطعامه وثلث لشرابه وثلث لنفسه. The human being does not fill any container that is worse than his stomach. It is sufficient for the son of Adam to eat what will support his back. If this is not possible, then a third for food, a third for drink, and a third for his breath. It's collected by Imam Tirmidhi and by Imam Ibn Majah. In reality, this hadith is not under the chapter heading that I wanted it to be under. And that's leading to the next chapter heading with regards to how much a person is allowed to eat or drink. How much is a person allowed to eat or drink? So this hadith here, hadith number 25, in reality, is out of place. Is what? It's out of place. And inshallah, on the next print, I would like to fix it and put a specific chapter heading with regards to something that's coming and not something that came. We're done speaking on the supplication. What's said of eating and drinking, after eating and drinking. Now we're discussing, and you see the movement, the cohesive movement, du'as. Now, how much can you eat? And one of the things, one of the problems, one of the flaws that many people make in Ramadan, or they have, is that they eat too much. Or there's some people who eat too little. And they suffer from malnutrition. And it also goes back to what I said, with regards to something being lawful, something being permissible, there's no hesitation. Bismillah. And there are many countries, unfortunately, including Muslim countries, this very day in which the people are starving. And the people don't have basic food, basic drink. People are suffering from very, very bad malnutrition, let alone famine. So be grateful for your blessings. And many brothers will say, oh, don't eat that, it's eating too much, you're overeating, don't eat meat every day, or you look how much food you buy at the supermarket, look how much food you have in your freezer. Maybe. But know for sure is that there are what? Many countries as we speak, which are what? Starving. They don't have. So eating too much, eating too little, it's both bad. Okay? So this hadith here, the hadith of Miqdam ibn Ma'adi Karib, and there are many hadiths in this collection in which the scholars of Islam, they differ on the authenticity, and this is one of them. All of the hadiths are not agreed upon by all of the ulama, but it's sufficient for a Muslim to read the hadith, to come across the hadith, and to know the hadith, and to know what's out there, and to know what's being used. So scholars who say is that it's disliked to eat until you're full, it shouldn't be done, one cannot reach spiritual enlightenment, one shouldn't eat but so much, so on and so forth. This is one of their proofs and evidences. The hadith states, the son of Adam can never fill a bag, a pouch, a sack, worse than his own stomach. If a human being needs to eat a little more, if he can't just eat just a little, if he has to eat something, then he should split it up. Third food, third drink, and third what? Third ear. In other words, don't overeat. Don't overeat. Don't stuff yourself and go and pick out in which you're bloated, you can't get up, you can't pray. Let alone some people, and you can read about different kings in the past who died because they overate. They ate so much that they killed themselves, right? That's a problem. Let alone Americans. And you read the statistics about obesity, and about diabetes, high blood pressure, and about cancer, and about different sicknesses and illnesses because of overeating. And there are other reasons behind obesity. We don't go extreme. Some people, they suffer from obesity for other reasons, other causes. But we know a big part of it is what? Just people just eating too much. And worse than eating too much is the quality and the nature of the food that you eat. Foods which are processed, and I'm no health guru, nor am I sitting in front of you acting like I am. Okay? I like junk food. I drink things that have caffeine in them, so on and so forth, right? No, pretzels are good, I think. Don't mention pretzels. Keep pretzels out your mouth. Salt. Sea salt. It's natural. It's good. The human body needs what? Iodine is a necessary what? Mineral for the human being. What's important is people eating foods that are made in laboratories, right? Eating foods that come from factories, in which the only concern is profit. That's it. How much money can we make? How can we stretch the products? What corners can we cut? What shortcuts can we make to make more? Right? And balance, of course. We're not saying that you can't have a donut or a cookie. We're not saying that a Coca-Cola is haram. We're not saying that. Balance. Okay? But you're drinking soda every single meal, eating this type of sugar, this type of salt, this amount of salt, this amount of sugar, every single meal. This thing which is processed, this thing which is every single, that's a what? That's a problem. And that leads to illnesses and diseases. So there are two things. There is what you eat, and there is the what? The amount of what you eat. Right? Both of them should be what? One should be mindful of. Wallahu a'lam. Page number 53 says the permissibility of eating to one's full. Hadith number 26. Anas bin Malik radiallahu anhu narrated, قال أبو طلحة لأم سليم قد سمعت صوت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ضعيفا أعرف فيه الجوع فهل عندك من شيء؟ قالت نعم. فأخرجت أقراص من شعير ثم أخرجت خمارا لها ففلت الخبز ببعضه ثم دسته تحت يدي ولافتني ببعضه ثم أرسلتني إلى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال فذهبت به فوجدت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم في المسجد ومعه الناس فقمت عليهم فقال لي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أرسلك أبو طلحة؟ فقلت نعم. قال لي طعاما؟ فقلت نعم. فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لمن معه قوموا فانطلق وانطلقت بين أيديهم حتى جئت أبا طلحة فأخبرته فقال أبو طلحة يا أم سليم قد جاء رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم بالناس وليس عندنا ما نطعمهم فقالت الله ورسوله أعلم. فانطلق أبو طلحة حتى لقي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فأخبر رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أبو طلحة معه فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم هلم يا أم سليم ما عندك؟ فأتت بذلك الخبز فأمر به رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ففت وعصرت أم سليم عكة فأدمته ثم قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فيه ما شاء الله أن يقول ثم قال إذن لي 10 فأذن لهم فأكلوا حتى شبعوا ثم خرجوا ثم قال إذن لي 10 فأذن لهم فأكلوا حتى شبعوا ثم خرجوا ثم قال إذن لي 10 فأذن لهم فأكلوا حتى شبعوا ثم خرجوا ثم قال إذن لي 10 فأكل القوم كلهم وشبعوا والقوم 70 أو 80 رجلا. Abu Talha said to Sulaym, I have noticed feebleness in the voice of Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which I think is caused by hunger. Have you got any food? She said yes. She brought out some loaves of barley and took out a veil belonging to her and wrapped the bread and part of it and put it under my arm and wrapped part of the veil around me and sent me to Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I went carrying it and found Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the masjid sitting with some people. When I stood there, Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked, has Abu Talha sent you? I said yes. He asked with some food? I said yes. Allah's Apostle sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Oh yes, Allah's Apostle sallallahu alaihi wasallam then said to the men around him, get up. He sallallahu alaihi wasallam set out accompanied by them and went ahead of them till I reached Abu Talha and told him of the Prophet's visit. Abu Talha said, oh Sulaym, Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam is coming with the people. We have no food to feed them. She said, Allah and His Apostle know better. So Abu Talha went out to receive Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, oh Sulaym, bring whatever you have. She brought the bread which Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam ordered to be broken into pieces. Sulaym poured on them some butter from a noodle skin. Then Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam recited what Allah wished for him to recite. And then said, let 10 persons come in to share the meal. 10 persons were admitted and they ate their fill and went out. Then he said again, let another 10 do the same. They were admitted, ate their fill and went out. Then he sallallahu alaihi wasallam again said, let another 10 persons do the same. They were admitted, ate their fill and went out. Then he sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, let another 10 persons come. In short, all of them ate their fill and they were 70 or 80 men. And this hadith is agreed upon. So the highlighting point from the chapter, from the hadith with the chapter heading is clear. It says is that it's permissible for a Muslim to eat until he's full. Whereas 10 people came in, they ate till they left. Another 10 came in, they ate until they were full. Over and over and over again until that happened 7 or 8 times, meaning it was a miracle. They became full from bread and butter, which was just under the armpit of Abu Talha. And he narrated that Sulaym sent them with the bread. It wasn't a lot, right? Okay? So what's important is that the hadith, the highlighting point from the hadith shows is that it's lawful for a person to do what? Eat until they are full. and that is not haram. Nor is it makruh. And this hadith is in Bukhari and Muslim, and the previous narration of Miqdam ibn Ma'di Karib isn't in the Sahihain. And there's difference of opinion with regards to the hadith being authentic. And then inshallah there's no clash between the hadiths. But for argument's sake, we can say the authentic hadith clearly says that they ate until they were what? Full. And the hadith of which is discrepancy says the worst thing for a human being to fill is his belly. Third food, third water, third drink, etc. Or third air. Right? So whether hadith is authentic or not, the authentic hadith and many others that I didn't mention in this chapter prove that it's lawful for a Muslim to eat until he's full. And a Muslim does not have to starve himself. And of course, eating till you're full is relative. Full doesn't mean that your belly is about to pop out. Right? You have to loosen your belt. That doesn't have to mean what's full. What's meant by full is that a person is satisfied and say, I'm full. Even though there's room for, hey, when you eat, you say, I'm full, doesn't mean that you have to eat until your belly is about to explode. Alright? And of course, there's a long argument with regards to all of that and how different Islamic groups and Muslim groups, they take it as a ibadah and sunnah to starve themselves, to kill themselves, to eat things, or it comes down to a very poor quality, and they think that gets them closer to Allah, the Sublime and the Exalted. And they think that Muslims who eat lawful food, halal food, good food, sumptuous food, they're far from Allah. And that they're disobeying Allah, and that they're greedy, and that they're given to the hayat dunya and its pleasures. That's a misconception, and that's a trick of the shaitan. And there are many hadiths in which the Prophet ﷺ ate fresh fruits. There are many hadiths in which the Prophet ﷺ ate meat. There are many hadiths in which the Prophet ﷺ ate warm, fresh bread. There are hadiths in which the Messenger of Allah ﷺ ate things and he gave companions things until they were full. Alright? Wallahu ta'ala, but it doesn't mean that the month of Ramadan is a month of eating and drinking. It doesn't mean that Ramadan is a month to just stuff yourself and pig out. That's not what's meant. Balance, like we said. And of course, people who say, well, today I'm not going to eat that much, or today I'm only going to have all vegetables, or I'm going to be vegetarian, I'm going to be vegan, or I'm not going to eat anything cooked. It's not that simple if your body is used to eating square meals every day. It's not that simple if you're used to eating warm food and eat something which is cold, right? So a big part of this is also based off of culture. Based off of what? Culture. Let alone the fact that be grateful for Allah's blessings. Don't worry, there'll be plenty of times in which you won't have food. There'll be times in which you won't have warm meal. There'll be time in which the food is nasty, quote unquote. There'll be a time in which you only have dates and water. So if Allah gives you rice and meat, alhamdulillah for that. Be grateful and be thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wallahu ta'ala. There are many, many fawaid we take from that hadith, that narration of Anas. Alaykum salam to Allah. From the benefits of that hadith that the ulama of Islam explained, fihi jawazu al-amali bil-qara'in, is the permissibility of picking up on and using clues and hints to go on a hunch. Sulaim, she heard the Messenger of Allah's voice and she said he was what? Hungry. His voice was da'if. In other words, in most cases he's hungry, and then she sent them, right? She didn't know for sure, but the highlighting point is that she used the what? Intuition. She used the context clue. So in Islam, it's lawful to use your gut. It's lawful to use your hunch, to go off on a hunch. But of course, that also has a what? A balance. Accusing Muslims, being suspicious of Muslims, believing something without hardcore proof, versus a person using his intuition to lead him to the actual evidence, right?
Yes, sir.
Wallahu ta'ala alam. Inshallah, we'll stop here tonight. If there are any questions on the class from the brothers and sisters here, if not from online. Sisters?
Yes. From the sisters.
Go first. Ladies first.
Sure.
Tayyip. There's just one question and a request. With regards to, can sisters, is it okay for to pray Tarawih in two separate groups, one group in the main Musalla area and one group in the overflow room. If it's a necessity, and if it's not a necessity, then no, there shouldn't be two Jama'ahs in one Musalla. Period. As far as sisters talking and being loud, that's very unfortunate. But it's not just a sister problem, the brothers, they do it. As we speak, people are talking. Come in, food is more important than beneficial knowledge. But that's how it is. It's unfortunate, but it's how it is. I've been to so many different masjids, conferences, lectures, in which the women that are trying to benefit and learn, they can't hear anything because the sisters are chitter-chattering. Hopefully they're chitter-chattering about something that's lawful, let alone the riba, backbiting, or gossip, or sister, did you see what she's wearing? Her husband got another wife, another husband, blah, 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 blah. Right? What's important is that be mindful of your tongue. If you're going to talk to your brother and sister, it's lawful, but not at the expense of preventing people from hearing the beneficial words. Carrying the tayyibah, the dhikr, right? Wallahu ta'ala. As far as parking, inshallah, brothers, please mindful not to block no one's driveway, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Ahmed. Is it permissible to take pictures with your aura exposed? For what purpose?
Let's say the sister is in her phone, she can take a picture without her kimar on.
Without her kimar on. Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. If it's lawful to take pictures, photographs, take photographs. A woman can take a photograph of herself without her kimar on. That's fine. She should be mindful of who sees that picture. What if she wants to take the picture for herself, or for her husband, or for her friend, or something? Her daughter, her brother, her uncle. There's nothing wrong with that. But what's important is no matter what you do, just use discretion with pictures, period. Wallahu a'lam.
What about ID shoots?
ID? You gotta have ID. Now I'll state trooper pull you over. You can't sell them pictures is halal, right? Coach. You say, yeah, take a ride with me. Right?
Jail will be around.
Jail won't be around for you. Also, Sheikh.
I apologize if I misheard you earlier, but can you provide some general context as to not being able to eat up through or until the delineation between night and day?
You're allowed to eat and drink as long as Fajr isn't in. So from Maghrib to Fajr is open, free game. You go to sleep, wake up, a little bit, a lot, whatever you want to eat, however you want to eat, it's all lawful.
And that's up to including what you said previously with not being able to eat through the when there's a clear difference between night and day. So, in other words, for your suhoor, you can't, is it permissible to eat up until you see that there is that clear difference?
No, don't do that. No. Stick with the time schedule. Stick with the day.
Okay.
As far as if you're living outdoors, you're in the bush, you're in the forest, you're trained, you know how to look at the white thread and the black thread, that's a different story.
Okay.
But us city slickers, stick with what's clear. Wallahu a'lam. Fadda, Abu Hussein.
Now, what's the etiquette of when they're dealing with one's neighbor, and what's the ruling about not speaking to them, whether it's via text or call or in person?
Well, in general, the neighbor has a high status, Muslim or non-Muslim. And the Prophet ﷺ negated Iman from those from whom their neighbors don't feel safe. He negated Iman. They're not a believer. So your neighbor isn't supposed to be harmed or molested or bothered by you, disturbed by you, on any meaning or sense of the word or the term. And not only not to harm your neighbor, but you should honor your neighbor. Because that's the problem that most of us make. We're not bad neighbors. I'm not blasting music. My kids aren't jumping around. I don't have, a bunch of crazy stuff in the hallway, parked in front of your driveway. I'm not staring and lusting off of your wife or your daughters. I'm not causing problems. But does that mean that I'm honoring you? It's a difference now. You're not a bad neighbor, but you're not a good neighbor either. Your neighbors don't even know you. They don't know your name. They don't even know you're Muslim. You never called them to Islam. You never not once gave them dawah. That's sick. May Allah forgive us all. You've been living on this block for 20, 30 years and never, not once did you call them to Islam. Shame on you. Wallahi shame. Sad. You have no good intentions for them. You didn't call them away from the hellfire, not even once. Sad. Okay? When the last time you gave your neighbor some food? A cake, some soup, some tea, anything. A bag of salt in the wintertime. Shovel their sidewalk, etc., etc., etc. So avoiding being a bad neighbor is one thing, but that doesn't mean that you're doing what? Fadliyukrim jarahu. Honoring your neighbor. And many of us, most of us, we neglect that, unfortunately. And of course, that's a long class in itself. Alaikum salam to Allah. You should speak to your neighbor, especially if that's culturally accepted, even if they're a Sikh, or Hindu, or Buddhist, a Jew, or Christian, apostate, whatever it is. How you doing? Good morning. It's not about religion. Basic decency. So not to speak to your neighbor at all without no clear Islamic reason is a problem. And Allah, everybody's culture is different. Where I come from, that would be considered to be extremely rude and disrespectful to just walk by your neighbor and not say nothing. Wallahu a'lam. Wa iyyakum. Next question. Any other questions? You got a question, Sheikh? Coach? In the back?
Here is a question.
Sure, Sheikh. You got an exclusive spot.
Good. One minute.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The question is coming from SC in Jamaican Queens. If you had to hesitate, then about how much dhikr, if you had to estimate, then about how much dhikr would you say some of the Salaf do in a day? I've heard people say 1,000 and some say 100,000 and subhanAllah other dhikrs. Allahu A'lam, I don't know about that. AJ from Cincinnati, Ohio. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh. Is it permissible for a kafir to pray in the ranks among the Muslims under the pretense that they are wanting to learn about Islam and try the salah? Coming to the masjid, it's lawful for them to come to the masjid. As far as them praying in the rows, I wouldn't necessarily condone that. If they did it on their own discretion, that's one thing. But I wouldn't consciously say come and join in the prayer with the Muslims. Because standing in the row requires wudu, requires the odor being covered, etc., etc. Wallahu alam. SD, DC, Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh. Is it permissible to intentionally put on socks to go to use the bathroom so one can just wipe over the socks versus the full wiping over the feet? You have wudu, you want to put on socks to make it easy for you to wipe over later, that's lawful. UA from London, UK. Can you give advice to someone who is trying to sit in but it's difficult due to the mass sihr and ayn? Were there any Tulabatin in Saudi who thought it's Allah?
1 minute, 1 minute.
This is why we have what? We stick to the schedule. It says 7:33. Yeah?
You got a minute more, inshallah.
A minute more.
Jazakallah khair.
We'll stop here now. Further Abdul Dude.
Is it permissible to burn sage and anything like incense to ward off evil spirits?